Today I'd like to share with you the framework for the lesson plans that I use so you'll understand why it's so easy to prepare the lessons and why it's so easy to implement them. There's really just four aspects to it. Number one, you offer a challenge, an open-ended challenge, like see if you can build a bridge, and that is the most open-ended with just one parameter. Just build a bridge. Even the simplest change in parameters can radically change the whole experience. Talk about a specific type of bridge the next day, or the size, or different sizes, or different types, anything like that. And it helps our minds to focus in on, instead of, for instance, writing a paper on anything, when you say write a paper on your favorite hobby, it becomes much easier to think through that and focus in on that. You can have such a simple parameter such as see if you can build a bridge, and there's an unlimited number of possible responses to that, virtually infinite number of ways you could fit different pieces together to make a bridge. And that's the main thing that I offer within the lesson plans that I'm doing, is the specific challenges and variations of a challenge that you could use. Then they build whatever it is that in response to your challenge. You allow a specific amount of construction time, at least give them some idea of how much time they have. Sometimes you may be as specific as having a timer, and other times you might just say, you have about 3 or 4 minutes to do this, or you have 10 or 20 minutes to do this. And you can adjust based on watching how they're doing. If they are really into it and they just want to keep going, maybe you have the freedom to extend the time, depending on how many materials you have. We're talking most of the time with Kiva planks, but this is really any loose parts. If you have fewer materials, your time is going to need to be shorter, because people can only build until they run out of materials to build with. After they're done, this is step number 3, you observe. And you encourage them to observe everything that has been built by the others. Oftentimes in my lessons, I call this a gallery walk. I think of the things that people are building as little works of art. Walking through an art gallery to observe and appreciate what others have built, as that the students are learning from each other. They're teaching each other new techniques. They have tried to do it this way, and then they look over here and they see somebody else did it some way that they never even thought of, and then maybe the next time they build, they might incorporate some of those ideas into theirs. You should have some conversations as this is happening. Sometimes it's just a quick observation and you just go sit back down and you build something, but especially at the end of a larger project where they've really invested in it, that's when you have the teaching opportunity to talk to them about what they've built and ask them questions. I often state that the building with Kiva planks or loose parts, the purpose is to help you teach whatever it is you really want to be teaching. If you are exploring history and you're going to build a settlement or a fort or something like that, the purpose isn't really the construction at that point. There's all kinds of side benefits from that, from all the construction and three-dimensional thinking. But perhaps what you actually want to be talking about is what happened at the Jamestown Fort. And so talking about that story, or some battlefield, or settlement of the West, or the railroads crossing the country, whatever it is that you might be talking about. Another thing that is happening great in this time where you're walking around and you're looking at things and talking about things, it is giving your students the opportunity to talk about what they have done and to share their ideas going from their experience, but they're getting their ideas into words and sharing that with other people, which is such a key life skill. So many people are intimidated or frightened to talk in front of other people, especially if they're sharing their own original ideas and thoughts. It's one thing to maybe give an answer or say something that you already know is established as this is correct, or this everybody would accept this. But when you're having fresh, new, original ideas and you're sharing those with other people, there's a certain vulnerability in that, but you also need to build a certain amount of confidence to be able to do that. Students generally find it pretty easy to talk about what they've made, and hopefully over time they'll become more and more comfortable. Once you've done whatever it is that you want to talk about, then you clean up. The nice thing about loose parts is they're all loose, so they don't have to be generally disassembled, or they haven't been glued together or anything like that, so you can put the loose parts back into a container. If they're Kiva planks, they're all exactly the same, so there's no sorting, so you just put them all back into the container and you can do the same sort of thing again in the future. So that's it. You have a challenge, you give them time to build the challenge, you observe things, you talk about it, you teach into whatever has been built, and then you clean up and you're done. This could be a 5 to 10 minute experience, or it might be an hour or more as you're doing this. So there's a lot of variability that might be involved. Here are some of the open-ended questions. I often talk about the magic of open-ended questions, because if you close a question and say, did you have a good time building? The answer is yes or no, and you're done, and you don't go anywhere from that. But if you are asking open-ended questions, that invites the person to expand on their experience. So here's some examples of open-ended questions. Number one is, what did you learn or discover as you built? Another question is, how is your final structure different from your original concept? Things might have shifted as you thought you were going to build something, and then it didn't work out the way you thought it was going to be, so you had to make some changes. What was the most difficult part? And so they get described their challenges and maybe how they overcame those and did something different. How are forces working on your structure? So here we're talking more about physics and just the structural integrity, and they might be saying, well, I built this wall and then I would lean something against it and the wall fell over, so I knew I had to reinforce that wall, or every time I built it this high it would fall, so I needed to do something different. So they have to, this gives them a chance to talk about the physics and the forces that are acting on the whatever they've built. How could you make your structure more attractive or more interesting? Sometimes people, like especially building towers, people just go straight up in there. There's a lot of fun in just building and repeating those things. But sometimes if the students are in a habit of doing that, getting them to think about, well, how can I make some adjustments just in the way that I'm stacking the blocks or the patterns or whatever I'm doing that could make this go from a very ordinary structure or something that looks like everybody else's structure. What can I do that would make this, set this apart and make it look a little bit different, make it look more interesting and more beautiful? Another question, what can you learn from the structures others have built? They can point out that I didn't know that, and now I do know that. Another question, and this is my favorite one, and this might be, depending on your students, this might be the only question you need. Tell me about what you've built, or tell me about your structure. For some students, if you're getting started, that may be too broad, but usually once students get accustomed to doing these exercises, they know this question is coming, they're comfortable with it. Oftentimes they want to tell you about what they've built, and so that's all you need is tell me about what you built. That is really cool, and that conversation might shift you into some very easy, natural follow-up questions. I find it especially fun and exciting to look at structures that sometimes might be incomplete, where it may not be obvious what they are. And once your students start telling you about what they built, and you find out that, oh, this little plank here is actually a diving board, or this one represents a plant or a flower or a tree, and it's something you would never know that just by looking at it. But once they start to explain it, you say, oh yeah, I can see that now, and it becomes much more interesting. Thank you for listening in on this one. I hope this is helpful, and maybe you can implement this structure into any other ideas that you have. I'm sharing lots of ideas over time for challenges and nuances of ways you could do that, but you can take this structure and use it in so many different ways in your classroom, and it's super easy for you, it's super fun and valuable for your students, and it'll make your classroom a playful, fun place for your students to be. Virtually any subject that you might be teaching in a school can be interrelated with this and make your overall classroom experience and the learning that's taking place more effective. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.